I'm inside Haiti's biggest penitentiary, with unprecedented access to one of the most overcrowded prisons in the world. Meeting the men who are lost in a system and who the outside world has long forgotten. At the National Penitentiary, where nearly half of the country's prisoners are locked up. It's home to more than 4,000 inmates. Among them are some of Haiti's most violent convicted murderers, rapists and kidnappers.
Tu m'accompagnes? Oh, merci. Merci beaucoup.
It's Florence's job to document human rights abuses all over the country.
Bonjour.
But she spends much of her time here because she suspects many of these men shouldn't even be in prison. The prisoners have named this block the Titanic.
This place is notorious, and Florence is surrounded by people. They're all desperate to try and tell her their story and get some assistance to get out. Does this happen every time you come in?
Chaque fois. Toutes les fois que je viens ici, c'est la même chose.
The first thing that hits you is the smell. Sweat, feces, urine. That and the barrage of noise.
I've only been in here for about 5 minutes. I'm starting to freak out. It's totally crammed full of human bodies and everyone's desperate. They're trying to get water, they're trying to get food. They're trying to stay alive.
They're locked up in these cells for 23 hours a day. As we arrive, it's breakfast. And the inmates are collecting their rations. We count 60 prisoners coming out. But inside, I count only 18 beds. The extra men sleep in makeshift hammocks or fight for space on the floor. At 72 years of age, Florence is known as Mamie Flo. For many of these men, she's their only hope. And I keep being handed pieces of paper.
Okay.
So I got this 6 years ago.
Like me, Florence is bombarded. Some of the prisoners tell me they've been here for 10 years without ever facing a trial.
We're getting this really overwhelming sense of responsibility. I've got all these little pieces of paper on my hands, some of them just scribbled on the back of cigarette packets. For some people, this is their only lifeline. This is the only way to explain what's happened to them.
The prison guards agree to let me speak with one of the inmates privately. He says the police grabbed him as he was walking through a market, but he has no idea what the charge is. The 2010 earthquake sparked a mass prison break. Jean escaped along with the other prisoners, but was later rearrested. The law states anyone arrested should be brought before a judge within 48 hours. But in reality, that hardly ever happens. Florence takes me to see the prison governor.
On a un espace de 1200 détenus. On est obligé de garder aujourd'hui 4359 détenus.
That's nearly 400% over capacity.
Il y a environ 529 qui sont condamnés. Et on a 3830 détenus qui sont en détention préventive prolongée.
Mais c'est beaucoup, pourquoi?
Oui, c'est beaucoup.
It's no wonder there's so much desperation among the inmates. 80% of them have never even been convicted.
Aux autorités de la justice qu'il faut questionner sur le nombre des détenus qui sont en détention préventive prolongée.
Oui.
C'est pas à moi de juger les autorités de la justice.
I want to track down a judge, so I'm heading across town to the courthouse, the Palais de Justice.
There are more than 3,000 people in the main prison who haven't yet been tried. From what I've managed to find out, the real logjam is happening at the Palais de Justice.
60% of government buildings were destroyed in the earthquake, including the old courthouse. Even though it's now been moved to a new building, the justice system is still struggling to recover.
Ça va?
Florence knows most people in this building. If anyone can find a judge, it's her.
Oh, oh. Mais... Fermé. Ah, il me semble qu'il n'est pas là.
Non.
Non, il n'est pas là non plus. C'est bon, on peut aller dans une des chambres pour voir s'il y a des procès en cours. On va voir ça.
Okay.
Bonjour, oui. Ils sont...
I'm starting to get a sense of why it's so hard for people to get a trial in Haiti. I've been in here for 10 minutes with Florence. She's knocked on 2 or 3 doors. She's had to walk into a courtroom and she still can't find a judge. Can we find some judges to speak to?
L'année judiciaire recommence en octobre.
Is this why there are 3,000 people in prison
Il y a
waiting
quelques
judgment?
cas, il y a quelques cas.
I'm told the judges have a 2-month holiday every year. And even when they're working, they only do part-time hours.
I think we found a judge.
Notre Fofo n'est pas en Haïti.
No, we haven't. We found his assistant. This is impossible.
Merci beaucoup. Il n'est pas là. He's not in Haiti. Comment ça va?
But it's not just the lack of judges that's causing the backlog of cases.
Ce sont les dossiers. Le problème, c'est pas seulement le juge. C'est tout ce qui supporte son travail.
The guys in prison who tell me, I don't know where my file is, nothing's happening.
Vous montrez qu'il y a du désordre.
They're not even in alphabetical order, Florence.
Là, je ne suis pas
Sorry, it's really making me quite angry. Seeing this is one of the most frustrating things that I've experienced since I got here. I'm going through my book and I'm looking at all the names of the prisoners who keep coming up to me and begging me to help them. Solomon, Francis, Wesley, Johnny. All of their files are in there somewhere, but nobody could ever find them. It's complete chaos.
The Haitian justice system relies entirely on handwritten documents. On top of that, 40% of Haitians can't even read and write. So if they can't afford a lawyer, they have little hope. The next morning, I meet Jacques Leton. He's one of the most successful human rights lawyers in the country. He represents some of those who are lost in the system.
En fait, comme je disais, aux dernières assises, on est arrivé à les faire sortir de la prison après 5 ans, 7 ans, 8 ans, 9 ans, voire 10 ans.
Jacques' been battling Haiti's justice system for 10 years. This year, he's won the release of more than 40 people who'd never even been convicted. Jacques' representing 2 inmates who are accused of being accessories to murder. But he's found evidence their alleged victim actually died of cholera. He wants to prove there's simply no case to answer. That's 5 years they've served for a murder that couldn't possibly have been committed.
Now that Jacques and his team have actually met these 2 men and confirmed that they're here, confirmed that the story they received is true, they need to go up to the administration building and see if they can get hold of a document to prove that these 2 men are in prison. Once they've got that, they can then go back to the courts and try to get them released.
So the first step is to actually prove they're in prison.
Le responsable des archives n'est pas là. À porte fermée.
Jacques and his team head off to speak with the prison governor to find out why none of the archive staff are around.
Et c'est tout qu'on a fait une demande de certificat depuis une semaine.
Le responsable, il est en formation.
Et vous savez pourquoi il demande que vous donniez des certificats de cours? Parce que
Je ne suis pas responsable. Je ne suis pas responsable.
The prison governor insists there's nothing he can do. So Jacques is forced to leave the prison to find a legal official who can certify that Hervé and Lexnor exist as prisoners.
Luckily, the court that Jack needs to go to is just around the corner from the prison, so we can walk there.
oui. Donc on a le juge.
We bring the judge back to the penitentiary.
The two prisoners have just been brought out for a second time today so that they can appear before this local magistrate to confirm their identity. And with this document, hopefully, they can prove that these men are actually here and then start the process of actually getting them out.
It's taken 4 hours to get one piece of paper just to prove that the two men are in prison. Finally, Jacques has what he needs to take their case to court. I'm told that on average, 3 inmates die here every month. I head to the infirmary to see the conditions. The beds are full. There are even people sleeping under the beds.
Ils sont tous malades ici?
Inmates are given 2 meals a day, but prison gruel is mostly made of flour and water. Those who don't have family to bring them regular meals can quickly become weak and malnourished.
This place is like hell on earth. There are scores of men in there, emaciated, visibly sick, and they've all been crammed into the same room. I'm told that some of their families don't know they're here. Some of them have been there for years. This is where most of the deaths in this prison happen. I'm told that in one weekend, 4 people were taken out of here and rushed to emergency. 3 of them died within days.
Haiti's struggling with a cholera outbreak that was brought into the country after the earthquake. Local doctors and a foreign charity do provide medical care, but diseases like cholera travel fast here.
All the men in the cells all around here are locked in for the majority of the day. They can't even leave to go to the toilet, so they do it in a bag. And when they get tired of having a bag of poo in their cell, they just chuck it out the window because, well, you would, wouldn't you? So the longer I stand here, the more uncomfortable I'm feeling.
Cramped living conditions also help the spread of tuberculosis, which kills scores of prisoners every year.
We're heading into this block of the infirmary, which is where they keep everybody who's got tuberculosis. I'm told there are over 150 people in here. Vous êtes combien ici? Vous êtes combien? 49. 49 ici? Vous prenez des médicaments?
Nous pas jeunes sommes de prison, stress, nous pas qu'à juger. Bon, on a passé à petite madame famille ça rend nous malades.
In many ways, this place is even more desperate than any of the other cells. These guys have to be locked in here because they're contagious. So I'm told there are 49 people locked in this cell. You can see just how angry they are. They can't leave and they can't be allowed to leave.
They're frightened they might die before they see a judge. Even among the minority of prisoners who have been to court, there are shocking allegations of injustice.
How long have you been in prison for?
Paul Pannell was thrown into prison in 2012. He went on trial 3 years later. Paul claims he's waiting for his release form to be handed over. something the court clerk should have done after his trial last year.
À chaque fois, ici, qui te pour papier à bon moi. Mais les m'a pas lavel, il fait me connaître. Si me dégain $1000, il t'a pas fait ça c'est fou moi.
We don't know if this is true, but the UN lists corruption as a major problem within Haiti's justice system.
He remembers everything to do with his case. He knows his case number, his prison number. He knows the names of the lawyers, the judges, all the people who've tried to get bribes from him. And I feel like with a little bit of investigation, I might actually be able to find out what's going on here.
48-12.
Florence offers to help me track down Paul's paperwork.
Donc le voilà, Paul Jean Pannell.
Il est déjà jugé au tribunal criminel.
Oh, il a été jugé en août 2015, c'est récent.
Ok, et qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Son chef d'accusation est association de malfaiteurs, complicité de vol à mer.
So he was found guilty?
On n'a pas encore l'ordre.
Paul says he was found not guilty, but there's no record of the verdict.
Après la session, le juge s'en va à son bureau, il écrit le jugement. Et c'est un huissier qui apporte l'ordre de jugement. Donc maintenant, il faudra que je sache qui était le juge qui l'a jugé.
This is like a bad dream.
Jusqu'à présent, ici, on attend
Le jugement de libération.
Paul's adamant the judge acquitted him a year ago, but the release form is nowhere to be seen.
Il faut des papiers pour qu'on puisse avoir les libérés.
Et une fois que les dossiers sont perdus, eh bien, le pauvre, il est perdu aussi. Tu comprends?
Without the paperwork to back up his claims, or money to pay a bribe, he's condemned to a life in prison.
Ever since I first met Paul, I've kind of wanted these details to not be true because the implications of all this, the corruption, the incompetence, the downright laziness of it all, is almost too much for me to comprehend. And then going in there and seeing the book and seeing that actually he's telling me the truth. And yet he's been left to rot in here.
Paul's future lies in the courthouse, but on my way there, I run into more problems.
I've just left the prison and I was on my way to the courthouse. I wanted to try and find out what's happening with the cases of some of the men I've met in there, but as you can see, the road's blocked off. There's burning tyres here, there are more down there. I can see a group of people, there's a protest going on. I even heard gunshots a few minutes ago.
There's been infighting in the Justice Department, and the city's chief prosecutor has been transferred.
And they've shut down the courthouse with their protest, which means that any of the men in there who are hoping to get their cases heard today, it's just not going to happen.
I want to put my findings to the Minister of Justice, Camille Edouard Jr. Haiti's had an interim government since February, and the presidential elections are just a couple of weeks away.
Now, when you've got nearly 70% of the people in prison who haven't even seen a judge yet, why don't you force the judges here to work more often and maybe even trained more and employed more to get the job done?
Yo gen totalement autonomie. Moi-même comme ministre justice, moi pas gen autorité de discipline pour me sanctionner.
And when was the last time you actually punished somebody for corruption in this system?
Côté que les difficile pour faire ça les traçabilité. Seulement le non gain évidence.
The National Penitentiary is totally overcrowded. It's 4 times over capacity, and that's a breeding ground for tuberculosis. It seems to me that your failure to provide an efficient justice system is literally leading to people dying in prison. You're literally killing prisoners. How do you respond to that?
Premièrement, son problème nous vient joindre, c'est pas nous qui venons avec lui, c'est défaillance système pendant des années qui baille résultat ça.
After the election, he hopes to tackle the number of pre-trial detainees and halve the prison population. Jacques finally made it to the main courthouse to try and free Harvey and Lexinol, the men accused of murdering a woman who was later found to have died of cholera.
The
case that Jacques and his team are getting ready for is known as a Harvest Corpus. He's essentially trying to argue that his clients have been wrongfully imprisoned. They don't need a hearing, they don't need an investigation, they simply need the judge to agree that there is no case to answer and they need to be freed immediately.
And in order to do that, he needs to get a number of legal officials together in the same room and before a judge.
In the next half hour, these 5 lawyers are going to find out if weeks' worth of work is going to pay off.
It's now in the hands of this judge.
Constater le caractère arbitraire, voire même illégal, de la détention de ces citoyens et de ces citoyennes pour celui-ci statuer sans délai. Sans délai!
The judge prepares to give his verdict.
On constate le caractère arbitraire et illégal de la détention des surrections à service. Hervé Jean, ordonne en conséquence leur libération.
Jacques managed to win the release of 2 men who, between them, have spent 10 years in prison for a crime they never committed. It's a small victory.
Congratulations. Good work. Congratulations. Congratulations.
We head back to the prison one last time. The city's preparing for one of the biggest storms in a decade.
Haiti is bracing itself. It's about to get hit by a Category 4 hurricane. This could be the worst natural disaster to hit the country since the earthquake in 2010.
The prison is on lockdown. That evening, Hurricane Matthew slams into southern Haiti, killing more than 1,000 people and leaving 1.4 million in need of aid. The welfare of the country's prisoners will once again be low on the government's list of priorities. 1 month later, Jacques' clients Hervé and Lexinor are yet to be released. There's a dispute about their paperwork. Paul's only hope is to have another trial. But since we left him, he's fallen ill and is now in quarantine. Nearly 4,000 prisoners continue to be held without trial in the National Penitentiary.